Did you know not all Roman gladiators were enslaved? In fact, quite the opposite was true for some. The origin of gladiators is as unconventional as it is fascinating. Often when we think of these famed warriors, images of enslaved peoples shackled and chained being led to the arena come to mind. While this was true for many early combatants, who were often individuals who had committed crimes or were enslaved, the reality is much more complex. As we delve into the 1st century AD, the face of the arena starts to change dramatically. Grave inscriptions from the time reveal a shift in demographics. The roar of the crowd, the thrill of battle, the prospect of glory and prize money began to draw scores of free men to the gladiatorial schools. Surprisingly, these weren't just desperate men or ex-soldiers skilled in fighting, but also included upper-class patricians, knights, and even senators. Imagine that. Senators, the very pillars of Roman society, willingly signing contracts to risk their lives in the bloody sands of the arena. These freelance warriors weren't driven by desperation or coercion, but by a desire to demonstrate their warrior pedigree. The lure of the arena was not confined to those at the bottom of society, but extended its reach to those at the very top as well. What drove these men to voluntarily step into the arena? Was it the allure of fame, the promise of fortune, or perhaps the primal thrill of combat, the adrenaline rush of life and death hanging in the balance? We may never know their exact motivations. However, what we do know is that the appeal of the gladiator's life transcended societal boundaries and norms. The Roman arena was not just a place of battle, it was a stage where societal roles could be reversed, where a slave could become a hero, and a senator could become a gladiator. The gladiatorial games were not just a spectacle, they were a reflection of the complexities of Roman society. From slaves to senators, the lure of the arena knew no social bounds. Imagine attending a funeral only to find yourself witnessing a gladiatorial bout. In ancient Rome, this was the norm. The early ties of gladiatorial fights to funeral ceremonies are a fascinating aspect of Roman history. When a distinguished aristocrat died, their families would hold graveside bouts between enslaved individuals or condemned prisoners. These fights served as a kind of macabre eulogy, a testament to the virtues the person had demonstrated in life. But it wasn't just about honoring the departed. The Romans believed in the purifying power of human blood. These contests, then, might have also acted as a crude substitute for human sacrifice, a ritual to cleanse the deceased person's soul. A morbid practice, you might think, but it was a deeply ingrained part of their belief system. Then, along came Julius Caesar, a man known for his penchant for grandeur. He expanded these funeral games, staging bouts between hundreds of gladiators in honor of his deceased father and daughter. The spectacle was immense, the crowd enthralled, and the popularity of these games soared. But it wasn't just about the spectacle. These games, in a way, were a political maneuver. They provided an opportunity for the powerful to curry favor with the masses. You see, the Romans loved their entertainment, and what better way to win their hearts than to provide them with a grand show? By the end of the 1st century BC, even government officials began hosting state-funded games. This was the dawn of a new era. The gladiatorial games, once a solemn ritual at funerals, had become a tool for political gain. The stakes were higher, the crowds larger, and the fights more elaborate. The gladiators, once sacrificial offerings at funerals, were now the stars of the show, their fights a spectacle for the masses. In the face of death, Romans found a spectacle of life, and thus, the gladiator games were born. The graveside bouts of yesteryears had evolved into an extravaganza that would become one of the most notorious forms of entertainment in ancient Rome. Contrary to popular belief, gladiatorial fights weren't always a death sentence. Hollywood may have painted a picture of bloody chaos, but the reality was far more ordered. Most bouts were in fact governed by strict rules and regulations, not unlike the sports matches of today. Now imagine this, two men, alike in size and experience, stepping into the arena. The roar of the crowd is deafening, but their focus is solely on each other. It's not a brawl, but rather a structured duel, overseen by referees. These officials held a crucial role in the fights. They would monitor the action closely, and likely call a halt to the battle as soon as a gladiator was seriously wounded. The outcomes of these matches weren't always determined by death. In fact, a match could end in a stalemate if the crowd grew tired of a lengthy, drawn-out battle. In such cases, both gladiators were allowed to leave the arena with their honor intact, provided they had entertained the audience well. The notion of gladiators fighting to the death every time is not only a misconception, but also a financial impracticality. Gladiators were expensive to maintain. Just think about the costs of housing, feeding, and training these warriors. Their promoters, therefore, would have been reluctant to see them die needlessly. It's likely that trainers taught their fighters to wound, not kill, their opponents. And the gladiators themselves, who often shared close quarters and trained together, might have been hesitant to deliver fatal blows to their fellow fighters. That being said, the life of a gladiator was undeniably brutal, and often tragically short. Many lived only into their mid-20s, and historians estimate that 1 in 5 or 1 in 10 bouts resulted in the death of a participant. Yet, despite the harsh conditions and the ever-present specter of death, it's crucial to remember that every match wasn't a guaranteed execution. Though brutal, the gladiator's life was not always cut short in the arena. Despite the regulations in place, the life of a gladiator was far from easy. The gladiators' lives were brutal and often cut tragically short. They were human beings, not just the faceless warriors we often imagine them to be. Most gladiators only lived to their mid-20s, a stark reminder of the harsh reality of their profession. Historians have estimated that somewhere between 1 in 5 or 1 in 10 bouts ended with the death of one of the participants. This high mortality rate is a stark contrast to the rules and regulations of the fights that were designed to minimize fatalities. The promoters, who had a significant investment in the gladiators, would have preferred to keep them alive. After all, they were expensive to house, feed, and train. But the reality of their lives outside the glamorized arena fights was far from glamorous. They were often enslaved or condemned individuals, their lives a constant struggle for survival. Their days were filled with grueling training sessions, preparing for the next fight that might end their lives. Yet in some cases they were free men, former soldiers, and even members of the upper classes who had chosen this life willingly. They were lured by the thrill of battle, the roar of the crowds, the glory, and the prize money. This was a world where fame and fortune could be won or lost in a single combat. But let's not forget, even those who survived the bouts were not safe from the harsh realities of life. Injuries, both physical and psychological, were a common part of their lives. The physical toll of constant fighting, coupled with the psychological stress of living on the edge, often resulted in a life filled with pain and suffering. For the gladiators, each day was a gamble, a fight for survival both inside and outside the arena. The gladiators may have been a product of their time, but their legacy lives on. These warriors of the past continue to captivate us, their tales of valor and courage resonating across centuries. They've been immortalized in the annals of history, their stories reverberating through time, etched in stone, ink, and the collective memory of humanity. Modern media has played a significant role in shaping our perception of these ancient fighters. Gladiators have been depicted in countless films, TV shows, and books, often portrayed as heroic figures, defying odds in the face of adversity. But, as captivating as these portrayals may be, they often give rise to misconceptions. The truth is, the life of a gladiator was far from the romanticized versions we often see on screen. Historically, gladiators were not always enslaved or condemned men. Many were free men, drawn to the arena by the promise of glory and prize money. They were not always engaged in battles to the death, with bouts operating under strict rules and regulations, and contrary to popular belief, their lives were not always cut short in their prime. Some gladiators even lived to become trainers, passing on their skills to the next generation. Yet, despite the misconceptions, the fascination with gladiators persists. It's a fascination that extends beyond the spectacle of the arena, delving into the lives of these men, their training, their motivations, their hopes, and their fears. This enduring interest has spurred ongoing historical research, with scholars continually unraveling the intricacies of the gladiatorial world. These explorations into the past are helping to shed light on the true nature of these ancient warriors, revealing a reality that is often more complex and nuanced than the depictions we see in popular culture. Yet despite the revelations, much about the gladiators remains shrouded in mystery, their full story yet to be told. The gladiators' story continues to captivate us, a testament to their enduring allure and the mysteries that still surround them.